it's amassing every day more and more, and trying to prepare for everything properly. And Starknet is massive. It's like I will want to tell you a lot of the story of how I started and how it leads to the future, hopefully for all of you as the idea. So let's see. My name is Tomasz Stanczak. I work at Nethermind. I actually founded Nethermind a few years ago, and I think that story may be similar in a way of my approach to Ethereum to the one that probably many of you will have with Starknet. So maybe a bit more of my background. I spent the last 5 years working like almost double time on Ethereum ecosystem, working with Nethermind and building this company to what it is now. We have lots of fantastic people. It's around 200 people working on Ethereum ecosystem, and many of them work on Starknet, on the tools that we build. Work with Flashbots, and I'll use that as an opportunity to talk about what MEV and Starknet will be. Work with the projects like Euler Network that build the fossil solution that uses Starks for proving the state. Work on staking solutions, Forta Council. Now, the Nethermind itself as a company does a lot of things. So particularly, I'll focus on what Nethermind does in the Starknet ecosystem. So we built the full client implementation, Juno. I think it's one of the most troubled projects. So I invite any builders to work on it with us, and we will be approaching the next iteration. So we want it to be as one of the clients of choice next to the Pathfinder. And while we have that story behind of building Nethermind client for Ethereum and slowly catching up with the ones that were built much ahead, like Geth, and we want to have the same with Juno and be close to community and build something that everyone will love. The Voyager block explorer, which if you're building already on Starknet, most likely you know. So this allows you to look at the blocks, look at the transactions, analyze everything that's happening on both the Starknet mainnet and Starknet testnet in Gurley. We built the SMT checker, a tool for the formal verification called Horus, and a team is led by Julian Sutherland. If you are interested in formal verification, please reach out to Julian via email. And we use this tool and generally our skills in formal verification to help the companies that build on Starknet to formally verify their code in Cairo. We built Warp, which is probably one of the most well-known tools that we've built. And this is a tool that is used for transpiling code from Solidity to Cairo. And Warp was used as this bridge for developers to say, hey, Cairo was hard. As we see, Cairo 1.0 is coming to solve this problem from a different approach. And say, hey, you may have the approach where you look at Solidity that you're familiar with, you transpile it to Cairo and start looking at the code that was generated. In the current version, the Warp 2 version, we see the code that is generated is much nicer, much cleaner. I'll talk about Warp just a bit later. We do cryptography research. So helping the companies in Ethereum space, but also anyone who builds on top of Cairo and Starknet ecosystem to solve the problems in ZK and cryptography. And we also double with DeFi, so we have a large team that does the DeFi research, market research, protocol design for DeFi. We built the AMM solution in Cairo. We help projects like Alva to build their solutions and move them to the Starknet ecosystem. And one more thing that I already mentioned, we collaborate with Flashbots to build the MEV infrastructure. And Flashbots is the research and development collective that builds the solutions for MEV, not only on Ethereum now, but also explores the space of the so-called cross-domain MEV. So the arbitrage, trading, liquidations, and the transaction fees in a democratized way across multiple domains, layers, and layer 1 chains. So as I mentioned, the company started a few years ago. Now it grew to over 200 people in 50 countries around the world. We also have developers now in Vietnam, and we hope to have More people collaborate with us here. Like I've already learned that there are some fantastic projects and developers, both in the infrastructure side and the DeFi side. So I had the pleasure to meet Kyber, I had the pleasure to meet Notional and many other projects. And I'm very, very inspired by what's being built here, and hope that here are the founders of the maybe already existing great projects, but also the future stars in the Starknet ecosystem. So I mentioned that I will just say a few words about Warp. You've learned that Cairo 1.0 is coming, and it means that for our Warp team, it's a lot of work within the next 3 months to prepare the compiler to compile from Solidity, transpile from Solidity to the new Cairo format, the 1.0 format. Not only for developers who write directly in Cairo, it's simpler to use Cairo 1.0, as also much, much simpler to prepare the transpiler now. Many of the constructs that were not available and we had to do a lot of workarounds with will now be possible, and the code that will be generated will be much simpler to read. The current work that we're preparing, so like we do work with existing large DeFi projects, transpiling, and there are some edge cases now that are a bit hard to solve. Things like the ternary conditions, some of the like inline assembly code, a few other ideas that should be coming with this Cairo 1.0 improvement. Recently, we published this Medium article, Cairo coding guidelines. I think that when 1.0 is ready, we maybe update this one showing, hey, what improved? How do you code in Cairo 1.0? So the coding guidelines should show you, this is how our team that has nowadays over 1 year of experience with coding in Cairo and going through all the iterations of Cairo, what we've learned to do to just improve the life for ourselves and communicate better while writing the same code. So we're still at this stage when Cairo guidelines, styles are being built. So when you join Starknet nowadays, you participate at the stage of the growth of the ecosystem where you contribute into the future standards, right? Like you are the ones that are building something that people will think, oh yeah, that's how you build it. This will be obvious for the future builders, but now it's not yet solved. And here I say, I was joining Ethereum ecosystem in around 2016, so building on Ethereum at that time meant that you still didn't have enough of the mature tools. I mean, it wasn't too bad. We already had, like I think Truffle was arriving around that time, after a few months after I joined. It was easier to analyze code structure, formal verification tools were coming. People were learning how to avoid the traps, right? So I was observing the DAO hack happening. So things like reentrancy problems on Solidity nowadays are obvious, are being checked by the most standard code quality checkers. This was not available then, and the same is the world of Cairo. So there might be traps, and might be safer language in many ways. Many of the learnings from Solidity building are already in the Starknet world, but there are also probably some unknowns that everyone here will have to discover. Now, what's coming to Starknet? The governance, the tokens, and the tools. And why I consider it extremely important and exciting. I mean, token appearance for many people who are believing in Starknet is exciting in a way of, like we've always seen that with the projects, the opportunity to invest, to say, hey, I believe in it, or opportunity to say, this will show the value of the ecosystem. But for a builder, it means that most likely it will start attracting a lot of users, new users to experiment. It will bring the possibility of like much easier value transfers within the ecosystem. It should start opening the Starknet ecosystem for deployment of the proper DeFi solutions that will use something native, and maybe the bridging requirements will be like less pronounced. And when we see this being much safer, probably also the bridges will start increasing the limits of how much value we can move between the systems. If there's already a lot of native value inside the Starknet, now we should see that also like the risk of bringing the value from the outside shouldn't be that problematic. So I think it's a perfect time to start building or even like continue building just before the tokens arrive, just before that ecosystem starts having this a very, very strong heartbeat and a lot of new users and a wave of new users coming in and experimenting. So when you think that's like the big projects like Ethereum, like other layer 1 chains, they start, plenty of opportunities to be the first one to deploy something new, first one to explore what can be done. And there is a lot of stickiness. Like if you solve some idea that's relatively simple, if you execute well, this stays with you and others build other projects. Like there's usually less reason to compete with something that's already exists in the space where there's plenty of opportunities to try something new, right? Usually, like you worried very often that, oh, this is such a simple idea, someone else will have it. So rush to it. If you're first, then others will probably pick something else because there are so many things. Now, there is something more that happens now, which is Ethereum, the merge just happened 2 weeks ago, not even 2 weeks ago. So there's a large change in Ethereum and what it means for Starknet. All the brainpower that was focused on the merge work for the last 2 years, very actively, already execution clients, consensus clients teams, the research teams in Ethereum were focused on delivering the merge without any problems. And asking questions about security, asking questions about safety of the protocol design, of the staking, and rushing to it. I mean, like not rushing too much, but making sure that that it's not delayed forever, right? Now it means that all of that brainpower, all of the talent comes to think about what are the next steps for Ethereum. And we've seen for a long time that the next steps for Ethereum is we solved the proof of work, going away, proof of stake is available. Now, how do we scale? The merge in Ethereum didn't provide any scalability improvements. What provides the scalability improvements will be dunk sharding, proto-dunk sharding on the way, so data availability layers, and focus on the rollups as the scalability solutions. If we say focus on the rollups and ZK rollups and optimistic rollups, it means that the Starknet will get much more attention. So if we say that Starknet will get more attention from the Ethereum researchers, from the Ethereum Foundation, from the Ethereum builders, do we have already some proofs of it? Recently, there was a post by Vitalik about the layer freeze. So you see already, like Vitalik is redirecting the attention of the community by driving with his posts the discussion about the layer 2s, about rollups, about layer freeze, how we build that. There is really a lot of attention put into the Starknet solutions there, so I encourage you to read that one. Shanghai network upgrade will deliver withdrawals in Ethereum, so it will not be yet something that will be directly related to layer 2s, but it will be the step where really all of the work in Ethereum will refocus on the sharding. For now, in parallel, you can think of two main deliveries: the withdrawals and the dunk sharding are happening. A bit of solutions for statelessness. So I think we're talking about 12 months maybe. But this 12 months, it already starts the race to be ready there for the deliveries. The last thing, it's probably still good to look at, does really a P4488 ever come back? Will it be considered as a solution or not? So this is the alternative solution for the data blobs for Starknet. It might be like a significant linear improvement to the performance, to the throughput of the data solutions for supporting Starkware transactions, Starknet transactions to flow through Ethereum. If you would like to read more about the actual solution available, like the most likely solution for Ethereum, I encourage you to read this Hitchhiker's Guide to Ethereum. It's probably like 80 pages to read, so maybe like an hour of reading, but it has a very good set of explanations. It's written by a non-technical person, or maybe like slightly technical person for sure, not deep mathematical researcher, but explaining in details everything that he learned through the through the discussions with the researchers, mathematicians, and developers behind Ethereum. And it's all very relevant for the future of Ethereum and Starknet indirectly. Okay, I would love to talk about my vision of why I was the most excited about Starknet, starting in 2019 when I was first time invited for the Starkware sessions in Tel Aviv. So I was already busy building on Ethereum. Maybe one more flashback. I started as a solo builder, bootstrapped, with some money that I brought from my times in the investment banking, right? So I was not starting without money. I guess for many founders who are starting as solo builders, it's really hard to get this seed funding. I didn't have the seed funding problem, but I went through the 2-3 years of development all the time. So I was learning. I decided to learn everything from the scratch by reading yellow paper, trying to implement it, reading white paper, reading all the conversations, and not really focusing that much on embedding myself into community. And that was most likely a mistake, right? So you can say there is a success story behind Nethermind, but very often it's worth to ask questions how we can improve this. So definitely going to events and building the network and embedding yourself into community and builders and working with other builders is the way to go faster. I started it later, and the biggest successes of Nethermind came from the network and relationships that I built by creating workshops, teaching, going to events. How did I start working with Starkware? It was through the EVM workshops, EVM bytecode workshops that I was delivering in London. And once Louis Guzman came over to learn about EVM, and then he was the one who introduced me and strongly recommended me to the Starkware team and said, hey, let's build together. So Starkware Sessions 2019, I thought, okay, this is amazing. The idea of Starks is the next big bet about what we can deliver. So when I chose Ethereum to focus on in 2017, I thought, all right, I'm absolutely convinced that Ethereum is the solution. And when I was looking at other layer 1 chains, what I saw is, okay, some of them were maybe technically superior in some aspects. Some of them had really good promises, and that promises were very often something that was sold, right? The quick Ethereum improvement, lots of transactions per second, and so on. But I was looking at the fundamentals of where the builders are, what developers are the most excited about, and when the true dedicated, loyal researchers are. And people like Vitalik, who would stay out of strong belief and strong dedication to the project that they created. I found it in Starknet as well. When talking to the researchers and founders to Starknet, I thought okay, these are founders that are already feeling that they're creating something they're excited about. They're not coming for the VC-funded quick project that is just money-focused. They're building the idea, and they have the very, very long-term vision, right? When I was talking to people like Uri, I was hearing the roadmap for 3, 4, 5 years and forward, 10, 15 years, and that roadmap was very, very convincing. You didn't see any promises copying the roadmap and going standard and thinking there is some kind of smoke and mirrors and nothing deliverable. So I still believe in it, and in Ethereum, I stayed always dedicated to Ethereum, even as the new, very interesting solutions were appearing. And I think this is how I go with Starknet now. So I believe this is the future for builders and what you can do with DeFi on Starknet. After being invited to work on Cairo in probably 2020, so already when I knew about Starknet, Stark's solution, I started thinking what could be possibly done there. I was asked to maybe experiment with some programs, with some examples in Cairo. And I asked myself a question, what would be very convincing for me coming with some experience from traditional finance? And I thought okay, so what is not possible to be done on Ethereum? And I thought, okay, nobody delivers derivatives in DeFi because pricing derivatives requires a lot of computation. That's not a huge problem in traditional finance world. You launch a few servers that are computing maybe risk computation in the evenings in batches, few programs that are they're calculating fast things like Monte Carlo simulations or complex computations. And with Starknet, you can do that within a single transaction, a set of transactions. You can deliver the proof of a massive computation. So I thought it's not about transactions per second. It's about what a single transaction can do. How much computation single transaction can encompass. And I thought if we have the source of randomness on Starkware, then we could potentially run a massive Monte Carlo simulation, so many different randomized scenarios of the pricing of the set of assets, and bring it back as a pricing solution. So the idea behind the extension of Euler network that I'm also building was to go to the chain and say, hey, is there some strategy that, sorry, not strategy, but like, is there some market-making liquidity provider that can price some set of assets? They say, for example, we can price staked ETH, we can price some bonds, we can price some options, we can price some swaps. And I would be able to select a subset of those assets, combine them to create a dedicated, like, structured product for myself. And this is what happens in finance all the time. You have speculators, but you also have companies that go to the banks and ask for a structured product that represents the risks. So let's imagine that you have a mining company from UK that maybe mines something in Chile and has to deliver the materials to, let's say, Brazil for further processing. Now, the company like this has the exposure to the FX risk in Chile because of the costs of equipment there being paid in Chilean pesos. Then maybe FX costs in Brazilian real for deliveries. They have the exposure to the risks of the commodities that they are extracting in Chile, let it be copper, and maybe a lot of other risks related to the FX markets in UK, where they pay to a lot of management people in GBP, and so on and so on. Then they think about how do they protect themselves against movements of the copper prices. Maybe they buy options or maybe futures. And now, could they go to the chain, find a smart contract, and say, I want to have an FX option, a copper commodity option, an option on maybe some on-chain assets, because I may be using lending, on-chain lending, and nobody prepares a product like this in a single click. But could Starknet deliver the composition where I press the button and it sends the information to the off-chain computation, computes it based on the Cairo rules, and I know that it follows the Cairo rules because it will be verified later, delivers back the computation result for verification with the price that I can accept, with some spread, depending on the risk of those. Now, for understanding the volatility and risk, Cairo program can also look all the way in the past, like 2-3 years in the past, for the history of trading, for the volatility of the markets. To do that, we can use solutions like the fossil state verifiability and bring all the past Ethereum on Starknet blocks and make statements about what was the time-weighted average price. We cannot really do that on Ethereum usually now, because either we have to take snapshots every day or every hour. We have to take snapshots and predict all the assets that we would like to look at in the future that are happening now, or I would have to provide some oracles from the outside. With Starknet, we can have a verifiable proofs about the past historical state by just looking at the state roots and delivering like the state proofs through the Merkle proofs and say, hey, okay, so this is the past average prices, this is past volatility, this is the set of pricing tools for various various assets, digital assets, real assets, synthetic assets. So I can price everything, display you the price, and you can accept it without anyone standing behind on the RFQ and saying, this is the price. So that was the long-term vision. The Starknet, I think it enables this very, very complex, fully automated pricers, market makers on the structured products in the DeFi markets in the future. I have no idea what I meant here. I guess the token, the Starknet token, really will be important here as well, the same way as try to imagine Ethereum without Ether. So the Starknet tokens incoming, as I mentioned, is important. The limits, okay, the bridging limits. So now the bridging limits are limiting the activity on Starkware. Both of those things will unlock a lot of DeFi potential. Now the credit history, the same way as you can have a state verifiability for the volatility or the average prices, there's a huge potential in bringing, there's some innovation on SBTs, soulbound tokens nowadays. And when you bring soulbound tokens, you can start talking about better identity and reputation. For reputation in trading, like trading activity, the risk appetite, the past loans performance, and so on, you can look at the on-chain identity, look back at the history of state changes and interactions with various protocols, and make statements, verifiable, provable statements in Starknet about what your reputation score, like credit score, is. So I look at your history of trading that you provide, you say, hey, like, in this, and this block, I was participating in the loans on Aave, on Compound. Maybe I was moving the assets on the bridge. And look, I generated regularly the returns, and I was always repaying the loans. We're having the access to the full history of particular on-chain identity that is already bound through soulbound token to multiple reputation sources. An identity like this is very valuable. People don't want to put the identity that's built over 3 or 4 years of trading at risk. The value of that identity becomes a collateral for the loan. You can think that the loan is uncollateralized, but actually identity becomes the collateralization. So how do you can fake a solution like this? You would have to prepare some very, very long-range attack of the fake trading over 2-3 years, and then give it up to take the loan that is not repaid. So I think Starknet really unlocks a lot of particularly novel solutions that many people are waiting for. Bridges and layers. So I think the same with the state verification and with the layer freeze and maybe later extension outside of Ethereum when Starknet starts to collect the commits of state from multiple chains. We can have a very efficient bridging. Solutions comparable to things like Wormhole and Layer 0 that do messaging and delivery, but we can make it all verifiable on Starknet's chain by providing the proofs of the past state, saying, hey, you locked the value on different chains, the value is available, I can check all of this, and I can process the bridging and move of the assets between chains. So this is early exploration, and I think that it's worth to look at solutions like Layer 0 and say, hey, how would it look if I moved it to Starknet, used Cairo, and enabled to do lots of computation through that layer. What Layer 0 does, it does a lot of computation, but using the standard solutions available for like EVMs or Solana platform and so on. And that paper that I mentioned earlier from Vitalik talking about layer freeze, talking about scaling and how they can be used for app-specific chains. Okay, so how much time I have? Do I have more time? 2 minutes? Okay, why I was stressed at the beginning, I was worried that I only prepared content for 10 minutes. I think it's not too bad. Okay, the MEV. So we know that the Starknet will be decentralized with the new sequencers coming, and like anyone will be able to, so some validator operators will be producing blocks. There were attempts in the past to do front-running protection, MEV protection for VDFs on Starknet, but my expectations is that most likely the valid approach to the MEV will be just democratizing access to it the same way as Flashbots did it for Ethereum. So anyone will be able to interact with the block builders and tell them, hey, I would like to establish a private conversation between you as a builder and me as a searcher or trader through some solution like Flashbots Relay, whatever the relay will be on Starknet, and start paying to the block builders for the proper arrangement of the block. So we know that it leads to some negative MEV, some negative externalities, But in many cases, it leads to simply very, very efficient arbitrage and pricing of assets on Starknet. So the big opportunity is the exploration of how exactly the on-chain Starknet MEV will look, how within that context of decentralization we'll prepare the builders, the block builders, compare it to the models of proposer builder separation from the new Ethereum proof of stake Ethereum, and also delivering solutions for cross-layer trading between Starknet, the Starknet to Ethereum bridges, and multiple chains. Maybe even Starknet can be used as this very efficient oracle provider or the verification mechanism for payouts on the settlements of cross-chain MEV. I'll not talk maybe more about this one, but again, if you explore the DeFi digital commentary, it should be quite useful. Okay, thank you so much. Please reach out with any questions, and I'll be staying here as well, so after the talks, I'll be happy to talk to everyone.
Hi, I'm Tomasz from Nethermind, and thank you so much for inviting me to the STARKVietnam. It was a great pleasure to talk to the group of builders here. Generally, my last week in Vietnam is a great experience. Fantastic teams, fantastic developers, builders, organizers of events. So I think I'm already planning coming back to Vietnam again and talk about Starknet, about Ethereum. Yeah, looking forward to it.